I knew Natalie was the one from our first conversation at that tech conference in Seattle. The way she lit up talking about database architecture made this software engineer fall hard. 3 years later, we had built a comfortable life together in our downtown apartment. Everything was on track, or so I thought. But lately I noticed changes whenever she came back from nights out with her single friends Jessica, Amanda, and Tara. Then came our anniversary morning, and those dreaded words, "We need to talk." If you are watching this from somewhere your partner does not know about, drop a comment below and subscribe. You might need what I learned about loyalty tests and the people who use them. Life with Natalie was everything I had hoped for in a relationship. At 32, I had been through enough dating experiences to recognize something special when I found it. I still remember the day we met at that tech conference in Seattle. I was presenting a talk on software optimization, and she asked the most insightful question during the Q&A. Later at the networking event, we ended up talking for hours long after most attendees had left. Natalie was 29, worked as a database architect, and had this infectious enthusiasm about her work that I found completely captivating. She was brilliant, witty, and carried herself with a quiet confidence that drew me in immediately. Our first date was at a small Italian restaurant near Pike Place Market, and the conversation flowed so naturally that the waitstaff had to politely tell us they were closing. What started as weekly dates quickly became something more serious. We fit into each other's lives with remarkable ease. She appreciated my somewhat obsessive organization skills, and I loved her spontaneous nature. We complemented each other perfectly, her creativity, balancing my practicality. After 18 months of dating, we decided to move in together. It just made sense. We were spending almost every night together anyway, and the lease was ending on my apartment. Finding our place together was exciting, picking out furniture and creating a space that reflected both of us. I remember thinking as we assembled our new bed frame together, laughing over the cryptic instructions, that this was what true partnership felt like. Our relationship was stable and supportive. We had our disagreements, of course, but nothing major. We had similar values and goals for the future. We had talked about marriage in abstract terms, agreeing it was something we both wanted eventually, but there was no rush. We were happy with where we were. Natalie had 3 close friends she had known since college: Jessica, Amanda, and Tara. They had a sacred weekly girls' night that I always respected. Jessica was recently divorced after a 10-year marriage, and from what Natalie shared, it had been messy. Her ex-husband had cheated multiple times, and the divorce had left her bitter and distrustful of relationships. Amanda was what you might call a serial dater. She cycled through relationships quickly, always finding fatal flaws in perfectly decent guys. And then there was Tara, who had never had a relationship last longer than 6 months. She seemed to sabotage anything promising that came her way. Initially, I had a good relationship with all 3 of them. When we first started dating, they were welcoming and seemed happy that Natalie had found someone. I made an effort to get to know them, joining them occasionally for brunches or birthday celebrations. But over the past few months, I had noticed a subtle shift in their attitude toward me. There was an underlying tension when I was around them, and conversations would sometimes stop abruptly when I entered the room. I tried to discuss it with Natalie once, gently suggesting that maybe her friends had developed some reservations about our relationship. She became immediately defensive, insisting that I was imagining things and that her friends adored me. But the change was noticeable, and it bothered me. "They just want what is best for me," she said firmly when I brought it up again. "They have seen me through some rough relationships before you. They are protective." I let it go, not wanting to create an issue between Natalie and her support system. But I could not shake the feeling that something had changed. Around the same time, I started noticing shifts in our relationship as well. Natalie began questioning aspects of our relationship that had never been issues before. She started asking for more concrete demonstrations of my commitment. "Do you think you would ever want to look at rings?" she asked one evening, seemingly out of nowhere. I thought we were on the same page about timing. I replied, confused by this sudden shift. "Are you feeling insecure about us?" "No, not insecure," she said quickly. I just wonder sometimes how I know that you are really in this for the long haul." These conversations started happening more frequently, and I noticed that they often occurred the morning after her girls' nights. Occasionally, her phone would light up with notifications from her friends during these discussions, which made me wonder what they were talking about during those weekly gatherings. Once I overheard fragments of a phone conversation where Natalie was saying things like, "I need to be sure, and testing is the only way to know." When she saw me, she quickly ended the call and acted like nothing was unusual. Her behavior became increasingly secretive. She started taking calls in another room and would close her laptop when I walked by. This was completely out of character for her, as we had always been open with each other. I tried addressing these changes directly, but my concerns were consistently deflected. "You are overthinking things," she would say with a small laugh that did not quite reach her eyes. "Everything is fine." But everything was not fine, and the distance between us grew. The easy comfort we had always enjoyed was strained, replaced by an undercurrent of tension neither of us was acknowledging. Despite these changes, I was determined to make our upcoming 3-year anniversary special. I made reservations at Canlis, the restaurant where we had celebrated our first year together. I had also secretly purchased tickets to see her favorite band that was coming to town the following month, planning to surprise her with them at dinner. As I was finalizing the details for our celebration, I noticed Natalie seemed distracted and on edge. She would smile and express excitement about our plans, but her enthusiasm seemed forced. The day before our anniversary, I overheard another fragment of a conversation as she spoke on the phone in our bedroom. "Yes, I will do it tomorrow," she said in a hushed tone. I know. It will be fine." My stomach tightened with anxiety, but I pushed the feeling aside. Whatever was going on, we would work through it together. That is what we had always done. That evening, Natalie was strangely emotional. She initiated intimacy with an almost desperate quality, and afterward she held on to me tightly, as if afraid to let go. "I love you," she whispered, and I could have sworn there were tears in her eyes. "I love you too," I replied, stroking her hair. "Is everything okay?" "Everything is perfect," she said. But her voice cracked slightly. Too perfect, maybe. I did not understand what she meant, but sleep was overtaking me, and I figured we could talk more in the morning. I had no idea that by morning everything would change. I woke up on our anniversary with a sense of anticipation. 3 years with Natalie, despite the recent strange behavior, had been the best 3 years of my life. I reached over to her side of the bed but found it empty. Following the smell of coffee, I made my way to the kitchen where Natalie was sitting at our small breakfast table, still in her pajamas, looking tense and fidgeting with her mug. "Morning," I said, leaning down to kiss her. She turned her face slightly so my lips landed on her cheek instead of her mouth. That small rejection sent a chill through me. "We need to talk," she said, and my world tilted slightly on its axis. She launched into what sounded like a rehearsed speech about needing space and time to think about our relationship. According to her, she was not sure if we had a future together and needed to step back to evaluate what she really wanted. "I just feel like something is missing," she said, not quite meeting my eyes. "I care about you deeply, Clarence, but I am not sure if this is what I want forever." I sat there in stunned silence, trying to process what I was hearing. The reasons she gave were vague and did not align with anything in our actual relationship. We had never had communication issues, we shared similar values, and until very recently there had been no signs of discontent. "Natalie, this is coming out of nowhere," I finally managed. "If there are specific problems, we should talk about them and work through them together." "It is not that simple," she replied, her voice strangely monotone. "Sometimes feelings just change." As the conversation continued, I noticed something odd. She seemed more focused on my reaction than on the actual content of what she was saying. She kept watching my face intently, almost as if she was waiting for a particular response. "Are you crying?" she asked at one point, sounding almost hopeful. "No, I am trying to understand," I replied honestly. "This does not make sense, Natalie. 3 years together, and suddenly on our anniversary, you decide you need space. Did something happen? I do not know about. Her eyes darted to her phone on the table, which had been constantly lighting up with notifications throughout our conversation. Something about her behavior felt off, like she was playing a role rather than having an authentic discussion. I just need you to know how serious I am about this, she insisted. I might really leave. My initial shock was giving way to confusion, and yes, a sense of devastation was setting in. But I was determined to respond thoughtfully rather than reactively. I hear what you are saying, I said carefully, and of course I do not want our relationship to end. But I cannot fight for something when I do not even understand what the problem is. Could you help me understand what changed? She seemed almost disappointed by my calm approach. I just told you, I am not sure about us anymore. But why last night you said everything was perfect? What happened between then and now? She struggled to provide consistent reasons, alternating between claims about feeling stifled, wanting different things in life, and not feeling emotionally fulfilled, none of which we had ever discussed before. After nearly an hour of this circular conversation, I felt emotionally drained and increasingly suspicious that there was more going on than a genuine desire to break up. I need some air, I said. I am going to take a walk and clear my head. When I get back, maybe we can talk more productively. She seemed alarmed by this. You are leaving right now. In the middle of this. Just for a short walk, I assured her. I need to process this. I grabbed my jacket and headed out, walking aimlessly through our neighborhood as I tried to make sense of what had just happened. None of it added up. Natalie's behavior, her inconsistent reasons, her strange focus on my reaction rather than the substance of our conversation, all pointed to something else going on. When I returned to our apartment about 30 minutes later, I found Natalie on the couch, frantically texting on her phone. She jumped when I entered, quickly locking her screen. But she was not quite fast enough. As I approached, I caught a glimpse of a notification preview from Jessica. How is the test going? Has he begged? Yet, the pieces suddenly clicked into place. Natalie, I said, my voice steady, despite the anger and hurt swirling inside me. What test is Jessica referring to? Her face went pale. What? I do not know what you are talking about. I just saw the text notification from Jessica asking about a test. What is going on? She stammered, trying to find an explanation, but the guilt was written all over her face. After a few moments of awkward denial, she crumbled. It is not what you think, she began, then stopped herself. Okay, maybe it is what you think, but it is not as bad as it sounds. Try me, I said, sitting down across from her. With reluctance, she explained that she had never actually intended to break up with me. The entire conversation had been a loyalty test, a concept her friends, particularly Jessica, had convinced her would reveal my true level of commitment. The idea was to see how hard you would fight for our relationship, she admitted, unable to meet my eyes. Jessica said that if you really loved me, you would do anything to keep me from leaving. According to Natalie, her friends had been planting seeds of doubt for months, suggesting that my lack of urgent movement toward engagement might indicate I was not fully committed. They shared stories of how other men had made grand gestures when faced with losing their partners. Amanda tried it with her ex, and he immediately proposed, Natalie explained. And Tara said her cousin did something similar, and her boyfriend wrote this epic love letter and showed up with 100 roses. So this whole thing, our anniversary morning, was just a manipulation to see if I would what? Get on my knees and beg. Propose on the spot, I asked, struggling to keep my voice level. Not exactly, she said weakly. Just to see how much you cared. They said if you really loved me, you would fight for me, not just accept it so calmly. And they are all waiting for updates right now on how I responded to this test. I gestured to her phone, which was still lighting up with notifications. She nodded miserably. They were curious. Jessica said the stronger the reaction, the more it proves the person cares. I sat back, letting the full weight of this betrayal sink in. The person I trusted most in the world had deliberately manipulated me, playing with my emotions, as part of a game designed by friends who clearly had unhealthy views about relationships. "Do you understand what you have done?" I finally asked. "You have taken our trust, the foundation of everything we have built together, and shattered it for a test that proves nothing except that your friends have too much influence over you." "It was just supposed to be a silly thing," she protested, though her voice lacked conviction. "I was going to tell you afterward that it was just a test and we would laugh about it." "There is nothing funny about manipulating someone you claim to love," I said. "I need some time to process this. Alone." Her phone continued buzzing with incoming messages. I could imagine her friends eagerly awaiting details of my distress, perhaps hoping for stories of tears and desperate pleas. "You should probably let your audience know the show is over," I said, nodding toward her phone as I stood up. "I will be staying at Michael's tonight. I need space to think about what this means for us." "Clarence, please," Natalie said, panic finally setting in as she realized her plan had backfired spectacularly. It was a mistake. I should never have listened to them. "No, you should not have," I agreed quietly. "But you did." I packed an overnight bag, while Natalie alternated between tearful apologies and frantic texts to her friends. As I headed for the door, she grabbed my arm. "Please do not go. We can fix this." I gently removed her hand. "I am not sure there is anything to fix right now. What I am sure of is that I need time to think." That night, lying on Michael's uncomfortable sofa bed, I could not sleep. My mind kept replaying every moment of our relationship, now tainted by this new knowledge. How many other tests had there been? How many conversations had been strategic rather than genuine? The questions multiplied as the hours ticked by. The next morning, I called in sick to work. There was no way I could focus on code while my personal life was imploding. Michael had already left for his job, leaving me alone with my thoughts. I spent hours reviewing our relationship, searching for signs I might have missed. Had there been other manipulations I had not caught? Now that I was looking, certain incidents took on new meaning. The time Natalie had suddenly become extremely jealous of a female colleague, insisting I stop working on a project with her, only to completely drop the issue a week later. Or the argument where she had threatened to spend the holidays with her family instead of mine, only to change her mind after I had made elaborate plans to win her back. Around noon, I called my best friend Michael during his lunch break to get his perspective. Michael had been my roommate in college and knew me better than almost anyone. He listened patiently as I explained what had happened. "That is seriously messed up," he said when I finished. "What are you thinking of doing?" "I do not know," I admitted. Part of me loves her and wants to believe this was a one-time lapse in judgment. But another part feels like something fundamental has been broken. "Trust is pretty much the cornerstone of any relationship," Michael said thoughtfully. "The question is whether you think it can be rebuilt. The thing that keeps bothering me is that it was not even her idea," I said. "She let her friends convince her to do something that goes against everything our relationship stood for, all because they think relationships should be tested through manipulation rather than built on honest communication." "That is a fair point," Michael agreed. "If she can be so easily influenced to do something like this, what happens next time her friends have a bright idea?" Our conversation continued with Michael careful not to tell me what to do, but helping me work through my own thoughts. By the time we hung up, I had clarity about what mattered most to me in a relationship: honesty, respect, and trust. Natalie's test had violated all three. When I returned to our apartment that evening, Natalie was waiting. She had clearly been crying, her eyes red and puffy. She jumped up from the couch as soon as I walked in. "Clarence, I am so sorry," she began immediately. "I made a terrible mistake. Please give me a chance to make it right. Let us sit down and talk," I said, setting my bag down. She had prepared a whole speech about how sorry she was, how she had been insecure, and how her friends had preyed on that insecurity with their toxic advice. She swore she had never done anything like this before, and never would again. "My friends were wrong," she said earnestly. Jessica has been so bitter since her divorce, and Amanda and Tara have never had healthy relationships. I should never have listened to them. The problem is not just that you listened to them, I said carefully after she finished. The problem is that you were willing to manipulate and hurt me to test my love. That is not how healthy relationships work. I know that now, she insisted. I will never do anything like this again. I will even stop hanging out with them, if that is what it takes. That is not what I want, I said. I would never ask you to cut off your support system. But the fact that you needed to test my commitment, instead of simply talking to me about your concerns, shows a fundamental lack of trust and respect. I paused, gathering my courage for what I needed to say next. I have been thinking about this constantly, and I have made a decision. I think we need to end this relationship. The color drained from her face. What? No, Clarence, please. It was one mistake. It was a mistake that revealed something important about how you view relationships and how easily influenced you are by people who clearly do not have your best interests at heart. I explained. I need to be with someone who trusts me enough to come to me directly with concerns, not someone who stages fake breakups to test my reaction. That is not fair, she cried. I was manipulated too. My friends convinced me this was normal. And that is part of the problem, I said gently. How we handle influence from others matters. The fact that you were so easily convinced to violate my trust is concerning. So you are actually breaking up with me? For real? Her voice rose in disbelief. Over one mistake. Some boundaries once crossed cannot be uncrossed. I explained. Trust is like that for me. I would always be wondering what was real and what was a test. That is not the kind of relationship I want. As the reality of the situation dawned on her, Natalie became increasingly distraught. She grabbed her phone and dialed Jessica, speaking through tears. He is breaking up with me. For real. Because of the stupid test you convinced me to do. Within 20 minutes, Jessica arrived at our apartment, clearly having rushed over. She burst in without knocking, ready to defend her friend. You cannot be serious, she said to me accusingly. You are actually dumping her over a harmless relationship test. There is nothing harmless about manipulation. I replied calmly. Would you consider it harmless if I had pretended to cheat on Natalie to test her reaction, or lied about having a terminal illness to see if she would stick around? Jessica faltered slightly. That is completely different. Is it? I challenged. Because from where I stand, deliberately causing someone emotional pain to test their response is cruel regardless of the specific scenario. Before Jessica could respond, Amanda and Tara arrived together, having apparently been summoned by group text. The small apartment was now crowded with tension as Natalie's entire support squad assembled. We never thought you would actually break up with her, Tara admitted after the situation had been explained. The guys usually just panic and then do something big to prove their love. That is the problem with treating real relationships like romantic comedies, I pointed out. Real people get hurt. Real trust gets broken. Oh, please, Amanda scoffed. Every relationship has games. That is just how it works. Maybe in your relationships, I replied, but that is not what I want for my life. I want a partner who comes to me directly with concerns, not someone who tests me based on advice from friends who admit they have never had healthy, long-term relationships themselves. Jessica, who had been unusually quiet, suddenly spoke up. He might have a point, she said slowly. My ex-husband was right about one thing during our divorce. He said I turned everything into a test he was doomed to fail. This admission seemed to create a momentary crack in the united front of the friend group. Amanda immediately disagreed, defending their approach while Tara looked uncomfortable. Look, the bottom line is that what happened cannot be undone, I said firmly. Natalie, I care about you deeply, but I cannot continue in a relationship where trust has been so fundamentally broken. The rest of the evening was a blur of tears, arguments, and eventually resignation. Natalie's friends took her out for drinks, presumably to comfort her while I started the painful process of figuring out logistics. We had lived together for over a year. Separating our lives would not be simple. Over the next week, we negotiated the practical aspects of our breakup. I would move out since Natalie had lived in the apartment first. We divided our joint possessions with minimal conflict, both of us too emotionally drained for petty disputes over kitchenware. Our mutual friends were divided. Some thought I was overreacting, while others, particularly those who had experienced manipulative relationships, understood my decision completely. Michael helped me find a new place and move my things, providing both practical assistance and emotional support. Natalie made several attempts to change my mind. She showed up at my new apartment with tearful apologies. She sent long emails explaining how much she had learned from her mistake. She even had Jessica call me to apologize for her role in the situation. "She really does love you," Jessica told me during that uncomfortable phone call. "She made a terrible mistake listening to us." "I believe she loves me," I replied. "But love without trust and respect is not enough." Maintaining my decision was one of the hardest things I've ever done. There were moments of doubt nights when I missed her terribly, and times when I questioned whether I was throwing away something valuable over one mistake. But deep down, I knew I was making the right choice for my own well-being and self-respect. 6 months passed, bringing changes and healing. I had settled into my new apartment, thrown myself into work, and slowly started rebuilding my social life. The acute pain had faded to a dull ache that appeared only occasionally, usually late at night, when I was alone with my thoughts. One Saturday morning, I was at my favorite coffee shop working on a side project when I heard a familiar voice ordering at the counter. Looking up, I saw Natalie and Jessica waiting for their drinks. My first instinct was to leave quickly, but before I could gather my things, they spotted me. "Clarence," Natalie said, looking startled, but not unhappy to see me. "How are you?" "I am doing well," I replied, surprised at how true it was. "How about you?" There was an awkward pause before Jessica spoke up. "I will grab us a table," she said, giving Natalie a meaningful look before walking away. "Do you mind if we talk for a minute?" Natalie asked, hesitantly. I gestured to the empty chair across from me. As she sat down, I noticed subtle changes in her appearance. Her hair was shorter, and there was a new confidence in her posture. "I want to thank you," she said, which was the last thing I expected to hear. "Thank me." "For what?" "For standing your ground," she replied. It was the wake-up call I needed. Not just about our relationship, but about the dynamics in my friendships, too. She explained that after our breakup, she had done a lot of reflecting. The friend group had fractured somewhat. She and Jessica had remained close, but both had distanced themselves from Amanda, who continued to defend the testing approach to relationships. Tara had moved to Portland for a job. Jessica and I both realized we had fallen into some really toxic patterns, Natalie admitted. She started seeing a therapist to work through her trust issues from her divorce, and I had to take a hard look at why I valued external validation more than honest communication. "I am glad something positive came out of it," I said sincerely. "Are you seeing anyone?" she asked, then quickly added, "Sorry, that is probably none of my business." "It is okay," I assured her. "I have gone on a few dates. Nothing serious yet. I have been taking things slow, being more upfront about my expectations in relationships." She nodded. "That makes sense. I have been single, working on myself, learning to trust my own judgment instead of outsourcing my relationship decisions to friends." Our conversation continued for about 15 minutes, surprisingly comfortable despite our history. There was no talk of reconciliation, just two people who had once been important to each other sharing a moment of closure. As she prepared to leave, Natalie hesitated. "I am truly sorry for what I did. You deserved better." "Thank you for saying that," I replied. "I hope you find what you are looking for, Natalie." "You too, Clarence." Watching her walk away to join Jessica, I felt a sense of peace I had not expected. The anger and hurt had largely dissipated, replaced by valuable lessons I would carry forward. In the months since our breakup, I had built a stronger understanding of my own boundaries and values. I had become more direct in my communication, making my expectations clear early in new relationships. My radar for manipulation and games had sharpened considerably. I had also been more intentional about building friendships with people in healthy, stable relationships, recognizing the influence that our social circles can have on our romantic lives. My friend Michael and his wife had introduced me to their friends, many of whom were in committed, drama-free partnerships built on mutual respect and open communication. Looking back at my relationship with Natalie, I could now see it more clearly, both the good and the bad. We had shared genuine love and connection, but there had always been an undercurrent of insecurity that made her vulnerable to terrible advice from well-meaning but misguided friends. The experience taught me that trust is not something that can or should be tested. Either it exists or it does not. Real commitment comes not from grand gestures performed under duress, but from daily choices to be honest, respectful, and supportive, even when no one is watching. I had also learned the courage it takes to walk away from something broken, even when there is still love present. Sometimes the hardest decisions are the ones that honor our core values, even at the cost of short-term happiness. As painful as the experience had been, I found myself grateful for the clarity it had brought to my life. I now understood what I wanted in a partnership, and perhaps more importantly, what I was not willing to accept. If I could share one message with anyone watching this, it would be to trust your instincts when something feels wrong in your relationship. Real love does not need tests or manipulation to prove itself. It shows up consistently in words and actions, in big moments and small ones. Have you ever experienced a relationship test or known someone who has? How did you handle it? Let me know in the comments below. And if you found my story helpful, please like this video and subscribe to the channel for more relationship insights. Remember, sometimes the strongest thing you can do is walk away from a situation that compromises your self-respect. Thanks for watching, and I wish you authentic, test-free relationships in your future.